A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas, published in 1907 by William Monks. Indians chase a sheriff 10 miles. Now, the author will relate another incident that occurred in Marion County, Arkansas, in the early settling of this country. There was a large relation of the Coker family who lived in that county. One of the Cokers raised 2 families, one by a white woman and the other by an Indian woman. The Indian family, after they had grown up and become men, resided a part of the time in the nation, where the mother lived, and a part of the time they remained in Marion County, where their father and other relatives lived. They were very dangerous men when drinking, and the whole country feared them. They had been in different troubles and had killed 3 or 4 men, and if the authorities attempted to arrest them, they defied them and would go to the nation and remain a while. There was a deputy sheriff in the county by the name of Stinnett, who claimed to be very brave, who said he would arrest them if he found their whereabouts. The Cokers learned what Stinnett had said and that the warrant for their arrest was in his possession, so they got some good toe strings and vowed that whenever they met him they would arrest him and take him to Yellville and put him in jail. A short time afterwards they met him in the public road. As soon as Stinnett recognized them, and having heard of the threats they had made, he wheeled his horse and put spurs to him. They drew their revolvers and put spurs to their horses in pursuit, commanded him to halt. But Stinnett spurred his horse the harder. They pursued him a distance of about 10 miles, but Stinnett's horse proved to be the best, and he made his escape. They again returned to the nation. The good people generally of the county were terrorized and afraid to raise their voices against them, and it became a question as to whether they had a man in the county who had the courage to attempt their arrest. They made it a question in the next election to elect a man that would make the arrest if such a man could be found in the county. There was a man living in the county by the name of Brown, who was a cousin of the Cokers, and he told the people that if they would elect him, he would arrest them or they would kill him. He was elected by a large majority, and after he had qualified, took charge of the office. The first time the Cokers came into the settlement, he summoned 2 men, thought to be brave, who pledged themselves that if it became necessary, they would die for him. He then went to the house of one of the Coker family, where the Cokers were staying, and on his arrival found the 2 Coker brothers sitting in chairs in the yard. He was within some 30 feet of them before they saw him. Their guns were sitting near them, and they seized them. But before they could present them, Brown had his revolver cocked and leveled at one of their heads, and told him not to attempt to raise his gun or he would kill him. Coker turned his back to him with his gun on his shoulder, secretly cocked it and leveled it upon Brown as near as possible without taking it from his shoulder, and fired, missing his aim. About the same time, Brown discharged his revolver at Coker and made a slight scalp wound. The other Coker threw his gun upon Brown and fired, killing him instantly. The 2 men who were acting as a posse for the sheriff turned and fled, leaving Brown lying dead on the ground. After the shooting, the Cokers fled to the nation and remained there. The author will now relate another incident that occurred in the same county. For years, the Cokers and Hogans had been intimate friends and drank, gambled, and horse raced together a great deal. There came up a trouble between Coker and one of his brothers-in-law, and one evening Coker, in company with Hogan, went to the house of this brother-in-law. Both had been drinking. Coker swore that he would ride onto the porch of his brother-in-law and made the attempt. His brother-in-law caught the horse by the bridle and warned him not to ride on the porch, and that if he did, he would kill him. Coker drew his revolver, spurred his horse, but as he entered the porch, his brother-in-law shot him dead. Coker, being a cousin of the Indian Cokers, they charged Hogan with inducing him, while drinking, to go to his brother-in-law's house, so as to give him a chance to kill him, and that Hogan's life should pay the penalty. Shortly afterwards, Hogan was traveling on an old trail that led along the bluff of White River. The river here made a bend in a horseshoe shape, following the bluff all around. The Cokers learned that Hogan was going to pass through this gap, and they lay in wait for him, cutting off all avenues of escape possible so he would be forced into the horseshoe for his escape. When he came in sight, they raised an Indian war-whoop and drew their revolvers. Hogan looked around and saw that his pursuers weren't about 100 yards of him. He saw his predicament, as for a quarter of a mile he confronted the bluff and that there was only one avenue of escape. He went to the edge of the precipice and looked over. There, under the bluff, lay the deep blue waters of White River, 150 feet below. Again he turned his eyes toward his pursuers. He knew it meant death if they caught him, so he made the fearful leap over the bluff, striking the water where it was about 25 feet deep. Hogan was a wicked man and cursed a great deal. He swore it didn't take him long to reach the water, but that he thought considerable time intervened from the time he struck the water until he reached the top again. He swam to the bank, which was but a few feet distant. His pursuers came to the precipice, looked over, and said that they had made Hogan do something they had intended to do, and that was to take his own life, as they supposed no human being could make the leap and live. After cutting his saddle and bridle to pieces, they turned his horse loose and reported that Hogan was killed. Hogan traveled around under the bluff for about 2 miles, made his way home, wound up his business, sold his farm, and moved into Fulton County, Arkansas, which ended the trouble between them. The author will relate another incident that occurred in Marion County, Arkansas. There was a widow residing in that county who was left with a family of children, among them a boy about 12 years of age. Her horse ran away, and she sent her boy in pursuit of it. After he had found it and was returning home leading the horse, Hogan and one of his friends met him in the road. They had both been drinking, and seeing the boy, concluded to have some fun out of him. Hogan, with an oath, said, "What are you doing with my horse?" The boy replied, "It is not your horse, it is mother's horse." Hogan sprang off his horse, and thinking to scare the boy and have some fun with him, said, "Here, you know it's my horse, give him up." The boy pulled the Barlow knife out of his pocket and opening it said, "You attempt to come near me and I will stick this knife into you." Hogan stepped up to him and said, "You little rascal, would you attempt to cut me with a knife?" The boy, without any further words, made a stroke at him with the knife, and the blade entered his body near the left breast. Hogan declared afterward that he jumped about 10 feet high. He turned to his friend and remarked, "I believe our fun with the little bugger has caused my death, or at least a serious wound." He went to a physician, had the wound probed, and found the knife had penetrated a rib and reached the inside. The physician informed him that had it passed between the ribs, it would have killed him instantly. Hogan remarked to the boy after he stabbed him, "My son, you are made out of the right kind of stuff. I had no intention of hurting you or taking your mother's horse from you. I merely wanted to have some fun. But I see I have struck the wrong boy this time. Go on and take your horse to your mother." The author will refer to another incident that occurred in Howell County, Missouri. In the year 1860, there was a man who resided in West Plains by the name of Jack McDaniel, who was a blacksmith by trade. This same Hogan came to town, soon became under the influence of whiskey, went down to McDaniel's shop with a horse, and ordered him to shoe him. McDaniel had 2 other horses in the shop at the time to be shod, and said to Hogan that as soon as he had shod those 2 horses, he would shoe his. Hogan said, "I am in a hurry, and I want you to shoe mine now." McDaniel told him that he could not shoe his horse until he had shod the other 2 horses. Hogan said, "If you don't shoe him at once, I will whip you." McDaniel then pulled the Barlow knife out of his pocket and opening it said, "Yes, and if you fool with me, I will cut your throat from ear to ear." At this remark, Hogan moved right up to him and said, "Just smell of my neck." McDaniel struck at him with the knife, and the blade entered just under the ear, cutting to the bone all the way around into the mouth. Hogan went to a physician in West Plains and had the wound dressed. He then went to a glass, looked in, and said that he had lived a long time, been in many tight places, but he had never had such a mouth as he had now, and remarked, My mouth looks as if it was spread from ear to ear." The people then generally gave their time to growing stock, especially horses and cattle, as hogs and sheep had to be kept close around the farms and penned of a night, especially the pigs, on account of wolves and other wild animals. I have known the wolves to kill 2- and 3-year-old cattle. Farmers fed their corn chiefly to cattle, horses, and mules. They always commanded fair prices. Cattle at the age of 4 years and upwards were driven to Jacksonport, Arkansas, and from there shipped to New Orleans. Horses and mules were driven to Louisiana, Mississippi, and some to the southern part of Arkansas, and there put upon the market. Prices generally ranging from $75 to $150. All of our groceries were purchased in New Orleans, shipped to Jacksonport. From there they were conveyed by wagons. Our dry goods were mostly purchased at Lynn Creek, Missouri, and brought through by wagon, but in the early settlement of the country they hauled dry goods all the way from St. Louis, except that what were brought into the country by peddlers. The peddlers would go to St. Louis on horseback with 1 and sometimes 2 led horses, buy the goods, pack them, place them on their horses, and peddle all the way from St. Louis and still further west and take in exchange all kinds of fur skins. I have seen peddlers with 1 horse still loaded with goods and the other covered with fur skins, and I have seen them again after they had disposed of all their goods with all 3 horses completely covered with fur skins and sometimes so heavily loaded that the peddler would either be walking and leading or driving. Money was scarce, but the people spent very little money, were not in debt, and lived much better and easier than they do now. Their counties were out of debt, and the county warrants were always at par. When my father first located here, there were about 4 or 5 settlers in all of the territory that now belongs to Howell County. There were but 3 men that resided upon what is known as the Middle Bayou, William McCarty and his sons Green and Willis. In about 3 years after my father settled here, McCarty sold out and located in the bayou above Bakersfield. In 1844, there was a man by the name of Thomas Hall, who resided about 10 miles southwest of West Plains. A man by the name of Cyrus Newberry resided about 10 miles from where West Plains now is, and a man by the name of Broadwaters resided near where Moody is now located. There was not a settlement in all the territory that now includes Howell Valley. There had been a settlement by a man who was a hunter, made at what is now termed the town spring at West Plains, who had cleared 5 or 6 acres, but had left it. All the valleys in Howell County were considered worthless on account of there being no water. When the country commenced settling, there was no attention paid to congressional lines. As they settled on the streams, they would make conditional lines, blaze across the bottom until they would strike the tablelands, and the next man who might come in and settle would blaze his conditional line across, and for years there was but little land entered. Men only sold their improvements, and there was a fixed law or custom that prevailed among them, that no man should enter the land and take another man's improvements without paying him for them. A few such instances occurred to my knowledge. The man was at once waited upon and informed of the rules and customs of the country, and besides the rules and customs, it was not right nor honest to take a man's labor without paying him for it, and that it was the intention and purpose of the people to see that justice was done every man, and he was thereafter notified to proceed to the late owner of the improvements and pay him the value of the improvements. And if they couldn't agree upon the value, submit it to 2 disinterested neighbors, and if they couldn't agree, let the third man be brought in, which finding would be final. In every instance, if the man who had made the entry failed to comply with the terms, he was at once notified that his absence from the settlement and a speedy departure from the country would be satisfactory to the settlement, and that if he failed to comply, he would have to submit to the punishments that would be inflicted upon him. If the improvements, which were always reasonable, were paid for, the party would move off, blaze out another claim, and go to work to improve it. But if he didn't receive pay for his improvements, he remained on the land, and the other fellow's whereabouts would soon be unknown. And when the land was sold for taxes, the man owning the improvements would buy it by paying the amount of taxes and costs without an imposing bid.